The recording device in my purse made the faintest mechanical whir as I pressed stop, my finger trembling slightly against the button. Across the conference table, Victoria Sterling, my boss, my mentor, the woman I'd once looked up to like an older sister, sat with her perfectly manicured hands folded, wearing that smile I now recognized as predatory. She had no idea that every venomous word she'd just spoken had been captured in crystalline digital clarity. I think we understand each other perfectly now, don't we, Emma? Her voice carried that sickeningly sweet tone she reserved for moments when she thought she held all the cards. I managed a small nod, keeping my expression carefully neutral, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Yes, Victoria, crystal clear. If only she knew how clear things had finally become. 6 months earlier, I had walked into Sterling and Associates marketing with starlight in my eyes and ambition burning in my chest. At 26, I was finally ready to prove myself in the cutthroat world of corporate marketing after grinding through 3 years at smaller firms. Victoria Sterling was a legend in our industry, a self-made millionaire who'd built her agency from nothing, a woman who'd shattered every glass ceiling in her path. When she personally recruited me from my previous job, promising mentorship and rapid advancement, I felt like I'd won the lottery. "You remind me of myself at your age," she'd said during my interview, her steel gray eyes appraising me with what I thought was maternal warmth. Hungry, driven, willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. I should have paid more attention to that last part. The first few months were everything I dreamed they would be. Victoria took me under her wing, included me in high-level client meetings, and gave me opportunities that typically took years to earn. I worked 16-hour days gladly, canceling dates and missing family dinners because I was living my dream. When Victoria suggested I handle the Morrison Group account, our biggest client, I nearly cried with gratitude. "You're ready for this, Emma," she assured me, placing a hand on my shoulder in her corner office, overlooking downtown Seattle. "I see great things in your future here." I threw myself into the Morrison project with religious devotion. The retail chain was launching a new sustainable fashion line, and they needed a complete rebranding strategy. I spent weeks researching, surveying target demographics, and crafting what I knew was brilliant campaign concept. My presentation deck was 60 slides of pure marketing gold, original, innovative, and precisely calibrated to Morrison's needs. The night before the big presentation, I worked until 3 a.m. putting the finishing touches on every detail. I practiced my delivery in the mirror of the office bathroom, perfecting each gesture and inflection. This was my moment to prove I belonged at Sterling and Associates, to show Victoria that her faith in me had been justified. I arrived at the office the next morning 30 minutes early, wearing my lucky navy suit and carrying my presentation materials in a leather portfolio Victoria had given me as a "congratulations on making it this far" gift. The Morrison executives were due at 10 a.m., and I wanted everything to be perfect. At 9:30, Victoria called me into her office. "Emma, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about the Morrison presentation." Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling aside. "Of course. Do you want to run through any last-minute changes?" She gestured for me to sit, her expression unreadable. "There's been a change of plans. I'll be presenting to Morrison today." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "I've decided to handle this one personally. You understand, Morrison is our most important client, and there are some nuances to the relationship that require a more experienced touch." I stared at her, my mouth suddenly dry. "But Victoria, I've been working on this for months. The entire strategy is my concept, my research, my—" "Your work will absolutely be credited appropriately," she cut me off smoothly. "Think of it as a learning experience. You'll observe how these high-stakes presentations are really handled." The portfolio felt heavy in my lap. "Will I at least be presenting alongside you? It is my campaign." Something flickered across her face, annoyance maybe, or impatience. "Emma, I think you're misunderstanding your role here. You've done excellent foundational work, but the creative vision and strategic direction are ultimately mine. You're still learning." I wanted to argue, to stand up for myself, to demand the recognition I'd earned. But Victoria Sterling was a powerful woman in a small industry, and I was nobody. So I swallowed my disappointment like bitter medicine and nodded. Of course, I understand. The meeting was torture. I sat in the corner like a decorative plant while Victoria presented my ideas as her own. Every slide I'd agonized over, every insight I'd uncovered through painstaking research, every creative flourish I'd crafted, she delivered it all with polished confidence, accepting the Morrison executive's praise with gracious humility. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we expect from Sterling and Associates, Morrison's CEO said, shaking Victoria's hand enthusiastically. You've outdone yourself, Victoria. Just doing what I do best, she replied with a modest smile. I felt sick. After the Morrison team left, Victoria pulled me aside. You did good work on this project, Emma. Consider this a masterclass in client relations. I managed a weak smile. Right, a learning experience. That night, I called my best friend Sarah and cried into my wine glass for 2 hours. She completely stole your work, Sarah said, her voice tight with indignation. That's not mentorship, Emma. That's exploitation. But she's Victoria Sterling, I protested weakly. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not ready for Stop. Sarah's voice was sharp. Don't let her gaslight you into thinking you're not good enough. You are brilliant, Emma. Don't let anyone make you forget that. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. The pattern became clear over the next few months, though I was too invested in my dreams to see it immediately. Victoria would assign me increasingly complex projects, praising my work and promising greater responsibilities. Then, at the crucial moment, she would sweep in and take credit for everything. My campaign concepts became her strategic insights. My client relationship building became her networking prowess. My late nights and weekends became her hands-on leadership style. The Hartwell Technologies campaign, the Green Valley Resort rebrand, the Pinnacle financial launch. Project after project, I poured my heart and soul into work that Victoria presented as her own. Each time, I told myself it was part of paying my dues, part of learning from the best. Each time, the bitter taste of injustice grew stronger. The rest of the office began to notice. During coffee runs and elevator rides, colleagues would make comments that stung like paper cuts. Must be nice to have Victoria do all the heavy lifting on your projects, said Marcus from Creative, not quite meeting my eyes. I don't understand how you keep getting these big assignments when you never seem to present anything, mused Jennifer from Accounts. I started working even harder, staying later, trying to prove my worth through sheer volume of effort. But no matter what I did, Victoria was always there to claim the spotlight. And slowly, insidiously, she began to undermine me in subtler ways. Emma's very enthusiastic, she would say in meetings, the word enthusiastic dripping with condescension. She has a lot of creative energy, though she sometimes needs guidance on practical implementation. Emma's still learning the ropes, she'd tell clients when I tried to contribute to conversations. But she's eager to soak up everything she can. The most maddening part was how she did it all with a smile, as if she were protecting me, nurturing me, helping me grow. To outside observers, Victoria Sterling was the perfect mentor, patient, wise, generous with opportunities. Only I could see the calculated cruelty beneath the surface. My confidence began to crumble. I second-guessed every idea, questioned every instinct. Maybe I really wasn't as talented as I'd thought. Maybe Victoria was doing me a favor by stepping in when I fell short. Maybe I should just be grateful for the chance to observe genius at work. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March, gray and drizzling like every other Seattle day that month. I'd been working on the Crossroads shopping center campaign for 6 weeks, a complete rebranding for a struggling mall that needed to reinvent itself to survive the retail apocalypse. The project was personal to me. I'd grown up going to that mall, had my first job at the food court, bought my prom dress at the department store anchor. I understood exactly what Crossroads meant to the community and how to help it thrive again. My strategy was unconventional but brilliant. Instead of trying to compete with online retail, we'd position Crossroads as a community hub. Local artisan markets on weekends, small business incubator spaces, community college satellite campus, co-working areas for remote workers. It wasn't just shopping, it was belonging. I'd spent weeks developing partnerships with local organizations, crafting budget projections, creating mock ups and timelines. This wasn't just a marketing campaign, it was a complete economic development plan. It was the best work I'd ever done. And 2 days before the presentation, Victoria called me into her office. Emma, I've been reviewing your Crossroads proposal. I sat up straighter, hope fluttering in my chest. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe she'd finally let me present my own work. It's ambitious, she continued, and something in her tone made that sound like a criticism. The client specifically asked for innovative approaches, I said carefully. They know traditional retail strategies aren't working. Victoria leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. The problem, Emma, is that you've gotten a bit carried away. This isn't really a marketing campaign anymore. It's some sort of urban planning fantasy. My cheeks flushed hot. It's strategic thinking. We're not just selling them ads, we're selling them a future. It's unfocused and unrealistic. Her voice was patient, like she was explaining something to a child. Clients don't want their marketing team trying to solve societal problems. They want concrete, measurable results. I felt something crack inside my chest. Victoria, this strategy could save that mall. It could save dozens of local businesses, create hundreds of jobs. Emma, she held up a hand. I appreciate your passion, I really do. But passion without practical wisdom is just noise. The word hit me like a slap. I'm going to rework this into something more marketable, she continued. Something the client can actually use. Rework it? A more traditional approach. Focus on retail optimization, digital integration, standard loyalty programs. Proven strategies that deliver measurable ROI. I stared at her, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. That's exactly what every other agency is pitching. That's why they came to us, because they wanted something different. Victoria's smile was razor thin. Different doesn't always mean better, Emma. Sometimes different just means inexperienced. That night, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, staring at 6 weeks of work that Victoria was about to strip mine and sanitize into mediocrity. The brilliant, innovative strategy that could have transformed an entire community was going to become another cookie-cutter retail campaign. I thought about calling Sarah, but I already knew what she'd say. I thought about updating my resume. But where would I go? Victoria Sterling's recommendation could make or break a career in this city. I was trapped. The next morning, Victoria's reworked presentation was everything I'd feared. Bland, conventional, soulless. She'd kept the basic framework of my research but removed every innovative element, every creative solution, every ounce of vision. It was professionally competent and utterly forgettable. And of course, she presented it as entirely her own work. I've taken a comprehensive approach to the Crossroads challenge, she told the client team, clicking through slides that I'd originally created. Building on extensive market research and community analysis, I've developed a multifaceted strategy that leverages proven retail optimization techniques. I watched from my corner chair as my weeks of passionate work were transformed into corporate speak. The clients nodded politely, asked a few clarifying questions, and accepted the proposal with the enthusiasm typically reserved for dental procedures. After they left, Victoria was practically glowing. That went perfectly, she said, gathering up the presentation materials. Exactly the kind of solid, dependable strategy our clients expect from us. I couldn't speak. The words were trapped in my throat like broken glass. You're learning, Emma, she continued, patting my shoulder condescendingly. Soon you'll understand the difference between creative indulgence and professional strategy. That was the moment something inside me died. Or maybe it was the moment something else was born. I started recording our conversations 3 weeks later. It wasn't premeditated, at least not entirely. I'd been experiencing what I can only describe as severe imposter syndrome, constantly second-guessing myself and wondering if I really was as incompetent as Victoria's gentle criticisms suggested. I thought if I could review our meetings later, I might understand where I was going wrong, how I could improve, what I was missing. The first recording was just a routine check-in about the Meridian Bank campaign. Victoria spent 20 minutes explaining why my initial concepts were a good start, but lacking the sophistication our banking clients expect. Listening to it later that night, I heard something I'd missed in the moment. The way she dismissed ideas that were actually quite strong. The subtle ways she undermined my confidence. the faint note of satisfaction in her voice when I apologized for my inexperience. I started recording every interaction. What I discovered over the next month made my stomach turn. Victoria wasn't just taking credit for my work, she was systematically destroying my self-confidence to keep me compliant. Every meeting followed the same pattern. She'd ask for my ideas, let me present them, then find subtle ways to make me doubt their value before swooping in with improved versions that were usually inferior to my originals. But the recordings revealed something else, too. In conversations she thought I couldn't hear, phone calls taken during lunch breaks, discussions in the break room when she thought I was in the bathroom, Victoria's true opinion of my work was very different. "Emma's actually quite talented," I heard her tell Marcus one afternoon. "Maybe too talented for her own good. You know how it is with these young hotshots. They need to be managed carefully or they start getting ideas above their station." "The Crossroads proposal was brilliant," she said during a phone call with a client from another firm. "Whoever came up with that community hub concept is a real visionary." Of course, I had to tone it down for the actual client. They wouldn't have understood the sophistication of the original idea. "I've got a goldmine in Emma," she told someone during what sounded like a business lunch. "She cranks out campaign concepts like a machine, and she's still young enough to think working for exposure is worthwhile. By the time she figures out what she's worth, I'll have built a reputation on her ideas that will last me decades." Each recording was like a knife twist. She knew exactly how good my work was. Good enough to steal, good enough to build her reputation on, good enough to make her wealthy. But she also knew how to keep me small, keep me grateful, keep me from realizing my own value. I spent hours listening to these conversations, my anger crystallizing into something harder and more focused. This wasn't just professional disappointment anymore. This was calculated exploitation, psychological manipulation, theft of my creative work, and my professional future. The final straw came during the Avalon Hotel's presentation. I'd spent 2 months developing a complete digital transformation strategy for the boutique hotel chain. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of competing with major hotel brands on amenities, Avalon would position itself as the choice for experience seekers. Local cultural immersion packages, partnerships with neighborhood restaurants and artists, rooms designed by local designers using local materials, a booking platform that felt more like a travel blog than a corporate website. It was my masterpiece. Months of research, dozens of interviews with travelers and hotel owners, a complete understanding of what modern customers actually wanted from their lodging experience. I'd even negotiated preliminary agreements with local businesses in 3 different cities. The night before the presentation, I was putting the finishing touches on my slides when Victoria appeared at my desk. "Working late again, I see." I looked up, startled. The office was empty except for us. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. "Just finalizing everything for tomorrow," I said, saving my work carefully. Victoria moved closer, looking over my shoulder at my computer screen. "You know, Emma, I've been thinking about this presentation." My blood went cold, but I kept my voice steady. "Oh?" "Avalon is such an important client. This could really make or break our relationship with them." I turned in my chair to face her. "The strategy is solid, Victoria. I've tested every element with focus groups, run the numbers a dozen different ways. The client research alone is—" "Oh, I'm not questioning your research," she interrupted smoothly. "You're very thorough, but I'm concerned about the presentation itself." Here it comes, I thought. You tend to get a bit passionate when you present. Sometimes that can overwhelm clients, especially conservative ones like Avalon's board. My hands clenched in my lap. They specifically said they wanted innovative thinking. They said they wanted results. Innovation is just one tool in the toolbox, Emma. Sometimes the most innovative thing you can do is present a traditional strategy with perfect execution. I stared at her, recognition dawning like a sickening sunrise. "You want to present this yourself." "I think it would be better for everyone involved," she said gently. "You'll get full credit for the research and concept development, of course, but for the actual presentation—" "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm sorry?" "No," I repeated, standing up slowly. "I'm presenting this campaign. It's my work, my strategy, my relationships with the local partners. I'm presenting it." For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash across her face before the gentle mentor expression slid back into place. Emma, I don't think you understand what you're saying. This is a seven-figure account. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. My voice was steadier than I felt. I know this campaign inside and out. I know exactly how to present it. Victoria studied me for a long moment, and I could practically see her recalibrating her approach. I appreciate your confidence, she said finally, but I've already told the client I'll be presenting. It would look unprofessional to change that now. When did you tell them that? This afternoon. The casual lie hit me like a physical blow. I'd been in the client call this afternoon. Victoria had mentioned that we would be presenting, never specifying who. That's not what happened, I said quietly. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I think you may have misunderstood. I was in the call, Victoria. For a heartbeat, we stared at each other in silence. Then Victoria laughed, a light, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. Emma, sweetheart, I think you're letting stress get to you. Maybe you should go home, get some rest. We can discuss this in the morning when you're feeling more centered. The condescension in her voice was like gasoline on a fire, but I forced myself to nod, to gather my things, to walk out of that office with what remained of my dignity intact. I made it to my car before I started shaking. That night, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, staring at the months of work that Victoria was about to steal. But this time, instead of just feeling helpless, I felt something else. A cold, clear determination. I opened my recording app and set my phone to record, then I practiced my confrontation. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and went straight to Victoria's office. She was already there, of course, probably rehearsing my presentation. Emma, you're here early, feeling better? Much better, I said, closing the door behind me. I wanted to talk to you about the Avalon presentation. Of course, I hope you've had time to think about what we discussed. I sat down across from her desk, my phone recording in my purse. I have. And I realize you're absolutely right. Victoria's smile brightened. I'm so glad you understand. You should definitely present the Avalon campaign, I continued. After all, it's your strategy, isn't it? Something flickered in her eyes, but she nodded smoothly. I'm glad we're on the same page. I just want to make sure I understand the situation correctly, I said, keeping my voice conversational. The Avalon campaign, the local partnership concept, the experience-focused positioning, the community immersion packages, all of that came from you. Well, it was collaborative, of course. But the core strategic vision, that was yours? Victoria leaned back in her chair, and I could see her weighing her words. Emma, you have to understand how these things work. Ideas don't just spring fully formed from one person's mind. They're developed through mentorship, through guidance, through the kind of strategic thinking that comes with experience. So when I spent 6 weeks researching travel trends and interviewing boutique hotel customers, that was just execution of your strategic vision? Exactly. She looked pleased that I was finally getting it. You're learning to understand how senior-level strategy development works. And when I personally reached out to local artists and restaurants to build partnership networks in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, market research, very thorough market research that informed the overall strategic direction. I nodded thoughtfully. And the booking platform concept? The one where customers can build custom experience packages before they even arrive? Strategic innovation based on industry trend analysis. Your trend analysis. That's right. I was quiet for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Victoria looked satisfied, like she'd just provided a valuable lesson in corporate hierarchy. Victoria, I said finally, can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Do you actually think I'm stupid? Her smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry? I'm just wondering if you genuinely believe I don't know what you're doing, or if you know that I know and you just don't care. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's expression shifted, the maternal warmth draining away to reveal something harder underneath. Emma, I think you're experiencing some confusion about professional boundaries. I don't think I'm confused at all, I interrupted. I think I understand the situation perfectly. You've been stealing my work for 8 months. Every campaign, every strategy, every innovative concept. You take credit for all of it while simultaneously convincing me that I'm not capable of presenting my own ideas. Victoria stood up slowly, her hands flat on her desk. That's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Emma, I think you need to be very careful about what you're saying. You're making claims that could be considered defamatory. I almost laughed. Defamatory? Victoria, I have documented proof of every conversation we've had for the past 6 weeks. I know exactly how you really feel about my work because I've heard you talking about it when you thought I couldn't hear. Her face went completely white. You've been recording our conversations? Among other things. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. Washington is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, which I did, it's perfectly legal. Victoria sank back into her chair, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely shaken. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want you to admit what you've been doing. Emma, I want you to say out loud that you've been taking credit for my work while deliberately undermining my confidence to keep me from realizing my own value. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, she laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. You have no idea what you're playing with, she said. Do you think anyone will care about your little recordings? Do you think anyone will believe that some nobody assistant was the real creative genius behind Sterling & Associates' biggest campaigns? Actually, I think they will. I could destroy your career with a single phone call, Emma. One conversation with the right people, and you'll never work in marketing again. I nodded calmly. You could try. You think you're very clever, don't you? Her voice was venomous now, all pretense of mentorship abandoned. You think you've caught me in some sort of trap, but you're forgetting something important. What's that? I'm Victoria Sterling. I've been building my reputation in this industry since before you were old enough to know what marketing was. You're nobody. A recent college graduate with delusions of grandeur and no real understanding of how the world works. I felt something crystalline and cold settle in my chest. Keep going. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I took credit for your work because your work means nothing without my name attached to it. Without my relationships, my reputation, my client base, your brilliant little campaigns would die in whatever second-rate agency was desperate enough to hire you. Interesting perspective. It's not perspective, it's reality. I gave you opportunities you never could have earned on your own merit. I let you sit in meetings with executives who wouldn't normally waste time on someone at your level. I attached my credibility to your half-formed ideas and turned them into actual business. She was getting animated now, leaning forward in her chair. You think I stole from you? I made you, Emma. Everything you've accomplished here exists because I allowed it to exist. And if you try to come for me with your little recordings and your righteous indignation, I will remind everyone in this industry exactly what you are, an ungrateful intern who doesn't understand the difference between doing research and creating strategy. I sat back in my chair, watching her face, letting her words flow over me like water. When she was finished, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, placing it gently on her desk. Thank you, I said. That was exactly what I needed. Victoria stared at the phone, realization dawning slowly across her features. You just recorded all of that. Every word. You tricked me. I asked you to tell me the truth about what you've been doing. You chose to tell me. Quite enthusiastically, actually. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her phone. I'm calling security. Go ahead, I said, standing up and slipping my phone back into my purse. But before you do, you might want to know that this morning I sent copies of all my campaign files, the original files with creation dates and edit histories, to my personal email account. I also documented every client meeting where you presented my work as your own, cross-referenced with my original presentations and research notes. Victoria had gone pale again. The Avalon presentation is in 45 minutes, I continued conversationally. I'll be presenting my campaign. You're welcome to try to stop me, but I think the client might be interested to know why you're suddenly reluctant to let them see the work they're paying for. Emma, wait. But I was already walking toward the door. Oh, and Victoria? I paused with my hand on the doorknob. You might want to think very carefully about what you say to anyone else about this conversation, Because everything you just said about making me, about my work meaning nothing without your name attached, about destroying my career, that's all recorded too. And I think it would make a fascinating addition to my documentation file. I left her sitting there staring at her phone like it might explode. The Avalon presentation went flawlessly. I stood in the conference room I'd presented in dozens of times before, but this time I wasn't sitting in the corner taking notes. This time I was at the head of the table, clicking through slides I'd created, explaining strategies I'd developed, answering questions about research I'd personally conducted. Victoria had called in sick. "This is extraordinary work," Avalon's CEO said when I finished. "The level of detail, the innovative thinking, the local partnerships you've already established, I have to say this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking strategy we were hoping for." "The community immersion concept is brilliant," added their marketing director. "How did you come up with the idea of positioning hotels as cultural gateways rather than just places to sleep?" I smiled, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced in months. I spent a lot of time talking to travelers about what they really want from their experiences. It turns out people don't just want a bed and a bathroom. They want to feel connected to the places they visit. For the next hour, we discussed implementation timelines, budget allocations, and expansion possibilities. The Avalon team asked thoughtful questions, made enthusiastic suggestions, and treated me like the strategic partner I'd always known I could be. When they left, practically floating with excitement about the campaign, I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes, just breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did it go?" "Better than I ever imagined," I typed back. Victoria didn't come in for the rest of the week. I spent those days methodically preparing for what I knew was coming. I organized all my files, backed up my recordings, and documented every instance of work theft I could remember. I also reached out to a lawyer, Sarah's cousin who specialized in employment law, and scheduled a consultation. "What Victoria did is textbook intellectual property theft," he told me during our meeting. "The recordings help establish a pattern of behavior, and your original file timestamps provide clear evidence of who created what. You have a strong case." But I wasn't sure I wanted to sue. What I wanted was something more immediate, more public, more satisfying. Victoria returned to the office the following Monday, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. She avoided me completely, communicating only through email and scheduling her meetings at times when I was out of the office. For 2 weeks, we existed in a state of Cold War. She didn't try to take credit for any new work, partly because I wasn't giving her the opportunity, but mostly because she was afraid of what I might do with my growing collection of recorded evidence. The breaking point came when I overheard her on a phone call with a potential new client. "I understand you're looking for fresh thinking on your rebranding strategy," she was saying. "I'd love to tell you about some of the innovative work we've been doing lately. Just last month, I developed a revolutionary approach for a boutique hotel chain." She was telling them about Avalon, my Avalon campaign. I stood in the hallway outside her office, listening to her pitch my community immersion concept, my local partnership strategy, my experience-focused positioning, all of it presented as her latest creative breakthrough. Something snapped. I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop, and began typing. The email went out the next morning at 9 a.m. to everyone in the agency, all employees, all clients, all strategic partners. The subject line was simple: setting the record straight. The message was longer: "Dear Sterling and Associates team and clients, I am writing to address some concerns about creative attribution and professional integrity that have come to my attention. Over the past 8 months, I have developed strategic campaigns for Morrison Group, Hartwell Technologies, Green Valley Resort, Pinnacle Financial, Crossroads Shopping Center, and Avalon Hotels. While I have been credited as a team member on these projects, the creative strategy, client research, and innovative concepts for each campaign were developed by me independently. I am sharing this information because I believe our clients deserve to know who is actually creating the work they're paying for. I also believe my colleagues deserve to understand the true dynamics of our workplace. Attached to this email, you will find original creative briefs and strategy documents for each campaign, with creation timestamps, client research and partnership development documentation, audio recordings of relevant meetings and conversations, Comparative analysis showing the evolution of each campaign from my original concepts to final presentations. I want to be clear, this is not about personal grievances or workplace disputes. This is about professional honesty and creative integrity. Several of you have worked with me directly on these campaigns and can verify the information I'm providing. I encourage you to review the documentation and draw your own conclusions. For our clients, the strategies you've implemented were thoroughly researched and carefully developed. The work is sound regardless of who receives credit for it. I stand behind every recommendation and am happy to discuss any questions you may have. For my colleagues, I hope this information helps you better understand the dynamics that shape our workplace and influences your own professional decisions. I will be transitioning out of Sterling and Associates over the next 2 weeks. My personal email is emma.cooper.marketing@gmail.com if you need to reach me directly. Best regards, Emma Cooper. I attached everything, every recording, every original file, every piece of evidence I'd collected over the past month. Then, I scheduled the email to send automatically and left for my lunch break. By the time I got back, the office was in chaos. Victoria was in her office with the door closed, presumably dealing with the fallout. My desk phone was ringing nonstop. Reporters, headhunters, former colleagues from other agencies. My email inbox was exploding with messages of support, shock, and requests for comment. Marcus from Creative stopped by my desk around 2 p.m. "Holy shit, Emma," he said, looking equal parts impressed and terrified. "You just nuked this entire place." "I just told the truth." "Yeah, but damn. Victoria's been on the phone with clients all day doing damage control. Half the team is updating their resumes. 3 people have already quit." I felt a momentary pang of guilt about the collateral damage, but it passed quickly. "What about the clients?" "Morrison wants a meeting tomorrow to discuss the transition. Avalon's CEO called personally to thank you for your honesty and ask if you'd be interested in consulting directly with them." Marcus grinned. "I think they're more impressed than upset." At 4 p.m., Victoria finally emerged from her office. She walked straight to my desk, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "We need to talk." I looked up from my computer, where I'd been fielding interview requests from competitors. "I think we've said everything we need to say to each other. You've destroyed everything I've built." "No," I said calmly. "I've told people who actually built it." "This is career suicide, Emma. You'll never work in this industry again." I smiled, gesturing to my overflowing inbox. "Actually, it looks like I'll have my pick of opportunities." Victoria leaned down, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You have no idea what you've done. The relationships I've spent decades building, the reputation I've carefully crafted, built on stolen work. Built on strategic thinking you could never have developed on your own." I stood up, forcing her to take a step back. "Victoria, you recorded yourself saying you stole my work. You called me a nobody whose ideas only had value when you attached your name to them. You threatened to destroy my career to keep me quiet. And you did all of this while I was recording every word." Her face was white with rage. "You manipulated me. I asked you to tell the truth, and you did. The fact that the truth makes you look terrible isn't my fault. I could sue you for what? Sharing my own work? Telling clients who actually developed their campaigns? Recording conversations in a one-party consent state?" I shook my head. "Victoria, you taught me something important about power dynamics. The person with the evidence holds the power, and I have all the evidence." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her options. Finally, she straightened up. "Clear out your desk. You're terminated, effective immediately." "Actually, I quit 3 hours ago. I submitted my resignation to HR right after I sent the email." I smiled sweetly. "But thank you for the offer." Victoria Sterling was forced to resign 2 weeks later. The industry scandal was swift and brutal. Marketing publications picked up the story, using it as a case study in workplace abuse and creative theft. The recordings I'd shared were particularly damaging, hearing Victoria's voice as she casually discussed stealing credit from a subordinate while simultaneously gaslighting her made for compelling evidence of systematic exploitation. Several other Sterling and Associates employees came forward with their own stories of work theft and credit manipulation. It turned out Victoria's treatment of me wasn't unique. She'd been building her reputation on the backs of junior employees for years. The agency lost half its clients within a month. Most of the creative team quit to start their own boutique firm. Victoria's carefully constructed empire crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. As for me, the morning after my email went viral, I woke up to 17 job offers and I chose to go freelance. Within 6 months, I had a client roster that included 4 Fortune 500 companies and a waiting list of businesses wanting to work with the woman who took down Victoria Sterling. More importantly, I was doing the best work of my career, creative, innovative campaigns that I could present myself, claim credit for, and feel proud of. The Avalon Hotel's campaign, implemented under my direct consultation, increased their booking rates by 40% in the first quarter. The community immersion concept became a model that boutique hotel chains across the country began adopting. I keynoted 3 industry conferences about authentic hospitality marketing. But the most satisfying moment came 8 months after I left Sterling and Associates. I was at the Pacific Northwest Marketing Excellence Awards, where the Avalon campaign had been nominated for Strategy of the Year. I had bought a new dress for the occasion, emerald green silk that made me feel powerful and confident in my own skin. During the networking reception before the ceremony, I found myself standing at the bar next to a woman I didn't immediately recognize. She was thin, tired-looking, with hair that needed professional attention and makeup that couldn't quite cover the dark circles under her eyes. It took me a moment to realize it was Victoria. She looked up as I approached, and I saw recognition flicker across her face. For a heartbeat, we stared at each other in silence. "Emma," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "Victoria, I heard about your nomination. Congratulations." "Thank you." Another silence stretched between us. Around us, the reception buzzed with industry gossip and networking conversations, but in our small bubble, everything felt frozen. "You know," Victoria said quietly, "I did help you. In the beginning, I gave you opportunities." "You exploited me," I interrupted gently, "from the very first day. I made you better, pushed you to... You stole from me." My voice was calm, matter of fact. "For 8 months, you systematically took credit for my work while convincing me I wasn't good enough to present it myself. That's not mentorship, Victoria. That's psychological abuse." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I suppose you're happy now," she said bitterly. "You got your revenge." I considered this for a moment, swirling the wine in my glass. "Actually, this isn't about revenge. It never was." "Then what?" "It's about truth. It's about making sure other young professionals don't have to go through what I went through. It's about changing an industry culture that allows people like you to build careers on stolen work." Victoria's laugh was hollow. "How noble of you." "I'm not noble," I said. "I'm just tired of pretending that what you did was normal or acceptable." The bartender handed Victoria a glass of white wine with shaking hands. She took a large sip before speaking again. "You destroyed my life." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself. I just made sure people knew about it. I spent 20 years building my reputation on other people's work, and you destroyed it in a single morning." I turned to face her fully, studying her face. She looked older, smaller somehow. The commanding presence that had once intimidated me was gone, replaced by something brittle and desperate. "Victoria," I said, and something in my tone made her look up. "Do you want to know the saddest part about all of this?" She waited. "You actually were talented. Some of the strategic insights you had, the way you could read clients, your understanding of market dynamics, you really did have skills. If you'd been willing to share credit to build people up instead of tearing them down, you could have had a legacy worth being proud of." Her eyes filled with tears she was trying not to shed. "Instead," I continued, "you'll be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when insecurity and greed override professional ethics." I was protecting my business. "Oh, you were feeding your ego at other people's expense." Victoria set down her wine glass with a trembling hand. "You don't understand the pressure." "I understand pressure just fine," I interrupted. "What I don't understand is choosing to respond to that pressure by stealing from people who trusted you." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine. "I'm sorry," she said finally. So quietly I almost missed it. I know you are, but that doesn't change what you did. What happens now? Do you think I'll ever be able to work again? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction at her downfall, not vindication for my revenge. Just a kind of hollow sadness for the mentor she could have been, the career she could have had, the person she might have been if she'd chosen differently. I don't know, I said honestly. That's up to you. What do you mean? I mean, you could spend the next few years trying to rebuild your reputation by doing the work yourself this time. You could mentor young professionals the way you should have mentored me, actually helping them instead of exploiting them. You could become known for lifting people up instead of tearing them down. Victoria stared at me. You think I could come back from this? I think you could try, but it would mean actually acknowledging what you did wrong and changing how you operate. Not just apologizing because you got caught, but actually understanding why what you did was harmful. She nodded slowly like she was processing something difficult. For what it's worth, I said. I hope you do. The industry needs fewer Victoria Sterlings and more people who understand that success doesn't have to come at someone else's expense. Before she could respond, I heard my name being called. Sarah was waving at me from across the room. The awards ceremony was about to start. I have to go, I said. Victoria nodded. Emma? I paused. Congratulations on the nomination, on your success, on everything. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yes, I said simply. I did. The Avalon campaign won Strategy of the Year. I stood on the stage holding the Crystal Award, looking out at an audience of my peers, people who now knew my name, my work, my value. The spotlight was warm on my face, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt completely, authentically myself. This award represents more than just a successful campaign, I said into the microphone. It represents the importance of creative integrity, of honest collaboration, and of supporting the people who do the work. I caught sight of Victoria in the audience, sitting alone at a table near the back. She was clapping politely, her face unreadable. I want to thank the Avalon Hotel's team for trusting me with their vision, I continued. I want to thank my former colleagues who supported me when I needed it most. And I want to thank everyone who believes that our industry can be better, more ethical, more collaborative than it sometimes has been. The applause was thunderous. Later, at the after-party, Marcus found me on the hotel's rooftop terrace. The Seattle skyline glittered below us, and I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So, he said, raising his champagne glass, how does it feel to be the woman who changed everything? I considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The months of stolen work, the systematic undermining, the crushing self-doubt. The moment of crystalline clarity when I'd finally seen Victoria for what she was. The cold determination that had carried me through my plan. The satisfaction of watching her face as she realized she'd been caught. The hollow victory of her downfall. The surprising sadness I'd felt seeing her broken and diminished. It feels like justice, I said finally, but not the kind I expected. What do you mean? I thought I wanted revenge. I thought I wanted to see Victoria suffer for what she did to me. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and bright on my tongue. But what I actually wanted was to feel valuable again, to know that my work mattered, that I mattered. And now you do. Now I do. I smiled, looking out at the city lights. And that has nothing to do with what happened to Victoria. It has everything to do with what I chose to do for myself. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You know, half the industry is scared of you now. Why? Because you proved that actions have consequences, that you can't just steal people's work and expect them to stay quiet forever. He grinned. You made a lot of executives very nervous about how they treat their junior staff. Good, I said. Maybe that means fewer people will have to go through what I went through. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Holy shit, you won. I'm so proud of you, I'm crying in my kitchen. You are incredible, and Victoria Sterling can choke on her regret. I laughed, showing Marcus the message. Your friend has a way with words, he said. She's been my biggest supporter through this whole thing, along with you and everyone else who helped me understand that what Victoria was doing wasn't normal or acceptable. Speaking of support, Marcus said, I heard through the grapevine that you're starting your own agency. Where did you hear that? Jennifer from accounts. She said you offered her a position as your business development director. I smiled. Maybe. And that you're planning to poach half of Sterling's former client base. I prefer to think of it as providing continuity of service. These companies worked with me on their campaigns. Now they'll just be working with me directly instead of through a middleman who took credit for my work. That's cold, Emma. That's business. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city below. Then Marcus raised his glass again. To Emma Cooper, he said. The woman who reminded us all that talent doesn't need to hide behind someone else's reputation. To telling the truth, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it changes everything. 6 months later, I was featured on the cover of Marketing Monthly with the headline, The New Rules of Creative Leadership. The article inside was a profile of my consulting firm and a deep dive into the cultural changes happening in our industry since the Sterling and Associates scandal. What Emma Cooper did was more than just expose one bad actor, the reporter had written. She sparked a conversation about creative ownership, professional ethics, and the responsibility we all have to protect and nurture emerging talent. The article included quotes from several industry leaders about implementing new policies to ensure creative attribution, establishing mentorship programs with clear ethical guidelines, and creating reporting mechanisms for professional misconduct. It also included a small sidebar about Victoria Sterling's attempted comeback. She'd started a new consultancy focused on ethical leadership development and had written a LinkedIn article about learning from past mistakes. The article noted that her client base was still quite small, but that several former colleagues had spoken positively about her efforts to change her approach. I felt a strange mix of emotions reading about Victoria's new venture. I wasn't rooting for her failure anymore, but I wasn't exactly cheering for her success either. Mostly, I felt grateful that her story was no longer connected to mine. My phone rang as I was finishing the article. It was James Chen, the CEO of Avalon Hotels. Emma, I just saw the Marketing Monthly cover. Congratulations. Thank you, James. How are things going with the community immersion rollout? Better than we ever imagined. We're seeing repeat bookings at rates we've never experienced before. Guests are staying longer, spending more, and our customer satisfaction scores are through the roof. He paused, but that's not why I'm calling. Oh. I wanted to let you know that we're expanding the program to 15 new properties next year, and we'd like you to lead the entire initiative, not just as a consultant, but as our strategic partner. We're talking about a 3-year contract with equity participation. I sat down hard in my office chair. James, that's incredible. You changed our entire business model, Emma. You helped us understand what hospitality really means in the modern market. This partnership feels like the natural next step. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the Seattle waterfront. 3 years ago, I'd been a nobody assistant desperate for recognition. 2 years ago, I'd been a stolen-from employee gathering evidence of systematic abuse. 1 year ago, I'd been an unemployed whistleblower hoping someone would believe my story. Now I was the CEO of my own consulting firm with a client roster that read like a who's who of innovative companies and a 3-year strategic partnership with one of the fastest-growing hotel chains in the country. The journey from there to here hadn't been about revenge, though that's how it started. It hadn't been about destroying Victoria Sterling, though that's what happened. It had been about something much simpler and much more profound. It had been about learning to value myself enough to demand that others value me too. My computer chimed with a new email. The sender's name made me do a double take. Victoria Sterling. Subject, congratulations. Emma, I saw the Marketing Monthly cover and wanted to reach out. Your success is well-deserved, and I'm genuinely happy for you. I know this is probably strange to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that our conversation at the awards ceremony changed something for me. You were right about everything. What I did was wrong, harmful, and inexcusable. I spent months being angry about the consequences, but I've finally started to understand that the consequences were exactly what I deserved. I've been working with a therapist to understand why I felt the need to take credit for other people's work, why I couldn't just be proud of my own contributions without diminishing others. It's been illuminating and humbling. I know I can never undo the damage I did to you and to others, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to do better. My new consulting practice is small, but it's built on principles I should have followed from the beginning. I'm working only with clients who want to improve their leadership practices, and I'm completely transparent about my past mistakes. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that you were right. I could have been better, and I'm finally trying to become the person I should have been all along. I hope your continued success brings you the satisfaction and recognition you always deserved. Victoria. I read the email twice, then sat back in my chair, processing the mix of emotions it stirred up. Surprise, certainly, a little bit of skepticism, but also something that might have been hope. Not hope for Victoria's redemption exactly, but hope that people could change, that growth was possible even after profound failure. I thought about responding, then decided against it. Victoria's journey toward becoming a better person wasn't my responsibility to validate or encourage. It was enough that she was trying. Instead, I opened a new document and began drafting a proposal for Avalon's strategic partnership. I had work to do, my own work I could be proud of, work that would bear my name and reflect my values. Outside my office window, the Seattle skyline sparkled in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in this city, Victoria Sterling was probably sitting in a smaller office, trying to rebuild a reputation she'd spent decades destroying. Somewhere else, young professionals were starting their careers, hoping their mentors would guide them with integrity instead of exploiting them for personal gain. And here I was, successful beyond what I'd ever imagined. Not because I'd destroyed someone else, but because I'd finally learned to stand up for myself. The recording device that had started everything was still in my desk drawer, though I hadn't needed to use it in months. Sometimes I took it out and looked at it, remembering the woman I'd been when I first pressed record, desperate, confused, convinced that she wasn't good enough to present her own ideas. That woman felt like a stranger now. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and headed home to celebrate another successful day of work that was entirely, undeniably, authentically mine.